Illustrator up to create a mandala, which is kind of like a kaleidoscope effect for a drawing tool. It's going to be important that you follow along very precisely, and let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to make a new document artboard, 9 by 9 inches. You can see everything is set up. I'm going to make sure it's set to CMYK color and 300 ppi and hit create. So here's our artboard, and you can kind of see that we're ready here. I'm going to start with a line, so I'm going to just use my pen tool, and I'm just going to click, and then holding the shift key down, I'm going to click again, so I create a line that goes across and outside of the boundary of the artboard. And then I'm going to hit the escape key just to make that line a singularity or an object. You can see my stroke is here, and if I go to my properties window, just going to make it a stroke of 2 so you can see it just for now. I'm going to take this line and I'm going to center it perfectly in the artboard, and the way I'm going to do that is going to the properties panel. I'm going to look down at the align tab and open this up, and temporarily I'm going to say align to artboard. This way when I hit the center left right and then the center, let me then select this object. If I hit the center left right and then the center up down, it will make this perfectly centered in the artboard. I will then take this line and create a copy that is rotated. So I'm going to go to my rotate tool, double clicking that will open it, and I'm going to make a 90-degree copy of that, and you can see the preview. And so now I've got two lines that with a perfect center point on the artboard. So that's kind of like where you want to start. Okay, the next thing, I'm going to select these two lines, and I'm going to bring down their strokes to about 0.5, just so that they are not in the way too much for the rest of this tutorial. I'm going to deselect just by clicking away, going to my layers palette and opening it up. You see I have the two paths listed up here in the layers palette. So what I'm going to do is, just for fun, select my pencil tool, N for pencil, and just draw just anything in the upper right hand quadrant right around here. This will just kind of function as like an example of what's going to happen next. And you'll notice that that path, called path, is selected because it's got the circle around the smaller circle right here. Okay, I'm going to go back to my selection tool. Now here's where the precision is important. I'm going to go to my layers tool palette area, and I'm going to click on this layer, but I'm not going to click here. I'm going to click on the circle so that it is selected. That means whatever I do now is going to be applied not to the paths, but to everything in this layer. And you'll notice you'll get the blue bounding box around your artboard, and it contains both the lines, everything inside. I am then going to go to Effects, Distort and Transform, and I'm going to select Transform. You've seen this box before. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reflect it around the x-axis, as you can kind of see right there. So now everything I make will be reflected around that x-axis, and I'm going to make a single copy. That means something here gets copied here. So this becomes like the mirror effect. I'm going to hit OK. And just so you can see it, I'm going to go back to my drawing tool, N for pencil tool, and you can see that anything I make on that side is going to reflect on the other side. I'm going to undo those things. So back to my selection tool. You don't need to do that part. Now we're going to add one more effect. We're going to take this object that we've made, and we're going to put it all the way around. We're going to rotate it around as copies around our layer here. So what we'll do is, again, make sure that layer is selected. You have to have that selected. Go to the Effects tool, Distort, Transform, Transform, and then it's going to ask us if we want to add another effect on top of the reflection effect, and we're going to add a new effect. And what we're going to use this time is the rotation. And the way it works is we're going to have one less copy than we have number of segments. So for instance, say I have 360 divided by 10. That gives us 10 segments. I will need 9 copies, right? So, and you can kind of see the preview shows us exactly how that would be. If you wanted more copies, you go 360 divided by 12. That would be 11 copies. So, and again, that'll give us the perfect circle that we want. So let's go ahead and select that, or you could hit 30 and 11 if you wanted to, and hit OK. And at this point, I would save this document file, save as, mandala template. And now we have something that will actually create a mandala type object when we use it. Now I'm going to save it again. This way I don't accidentally save it twice. And then I will call this one mandala 1. And now I can start modifying things the way we're going to show you. So since I'm not going to need these paths, I could turn them off if I wanted to, but I'm going to leave them on just so you can see. And you can also turn off this original path if you wanted to as well. Now remember, this is all being done through transformation. So when you select this, all these get changed. So if I change this here, you can see that'll change it in all the quadrants. Okay, so at this point, you could start drawing if you wanted to. So for instance, you could zoom in and select a stroke and just start with your tool. Remember that your pencil tool has the ability to be a lot smoother, as well as to not actually create or close paths. So turning these two off will make sure that, so what would happen normally is you would make a path and then you would try to make that path again and it would try to overwrite that path. So turning that off sometimes for this, just temporarily turning it off, really does help it sometimes if you're drawing something. So you can create your paths like this and change the strokes after you've created it, something like that, and even change the shape of the object. But notice that if you do that again, everything reverts back to one point and then the uniform stroke. If you wanted to have it remember the previous stroke, we did this before, make sure you open your appearance window, and then in the upper right hand corner, make sure that this has been unchecked. If you do that, it will remember your previous stroke. So for instance, maybe I want this shape, and you'll see that that shape is involved right there, and then maybe we make that larger. Now you'll see if I draw something new, it actually remembers these things, so which is a lot nicer, especially because you're gonna be drawing quite a bit for this assignment, and you can kind of see how this works. So this is how you would go about just starting to create some type of mandala, and again looking for line widths that are different in size and different in shape. And this took me a couple minutes, and one of the things that I wanted to do, so for instance here's like something I could show you, is I wanted to make leaves that actually where the actual elements perfectly hit these things without overlapping. And so for instance, if I make a leaf here and just do something like that, but if I make a larger leaf, I would like this to go here and stop. And if I go accidentally over, you can kind of see that I get this kind of sloppy area right there. And so what we're going to do next is I'm going to show you how you could create a clipping mask, which is in essence a little frame that allows you only to see inside of the frame. And we're going to use a triangle, and anything that I draw inside of that triangle we will see, and it will be reflected, and everything outside of that triangle will be disappeared or made invisible. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just click in anywhere that's not selecting anything, and you can see from our layers here that nothing is like selected. There's no circle on a circle here. Just make sure nothing is selected. I'm going to use my pen tool, P for pen, and what I'm going to do is zoom into the center, and what we're going to do is create a perfect triangle right at the intersection between right where it's centered, right? So we're going to click right here, and this will allow us to start right in the center. Then we're going to zoom out, and using our smart guides, we're going to snap to our guide, click here once, right? And we're going to click over here to this next guide, and then finally back to our center to create a triangle. Now currently what you'll see is a stroke, because my stroke has been set up to be that different uniform look. But don't worry about the stroke, because if I flip this, you'll see it just becomes a solid square. So what we're going to do is anything that I drew inside of that, we will clip out. And the way we do that is we have it selected. It's already there. We go back to our direct selection tool, and you can see it's outlined right here, and it's like available here. And you can see down here, there is this new little make and release clipping mask button. If you click that, because this path is selected, and go ahead and click it once, you'll notice now that everything I've drawn is inside of that boundary. So for instance, let's take a look at how this works. I'm going to go back to my drawing tool, N for selection, N for drawing, and I'm going to make sure that my stroke is black, and I'm going to pick some interesting scaling thing. So like you notice how I was very careful here, but you don't have to be. So you can see you can go right across and it won't actually go past this boundary. So even if you do this, you'll see that it's only here that it gets where the visibility is. So again, you can now use that clipping mask to make your design a little bit more interesting and easier for you to use. So again, the clipping mask, if I were to turn that off, and now I don't know where it is, I've added quite a couple things since that time. Let's see. Yeah, it's right around here. I think this is it. That's the clipping mask. You can see how it changes the design completely. Just going to call it C for clip so you can kind of see. So if I zoom in, if I turn the clipping mask off, boom, that's what we have, where it kind of overlaps, and then turning it back on makes it nice and pretty. So what do you do with this once you've gotten it to a point where you really like it and you're ready to export? Well, we're going to File, Save a Copy, because we don't want to ruin this, because once we do this, we can't undo it. So we're going to do Final 1, save it, and then we're going to go to select here, and we're going to select everything by just clicking on the layers here. Now, if you don't want those paths, you might want to turn those off so you don't see them, right? And you don't want that original, that's also possible. And if you don't want that clipping mask to be, now the clipping mask itself has a stroke, and you can kind of see that. I'm going to just make the stroke invisible as well for that clipping mask. Currently, I've not selected the clipping mask, so let me just select it and then make that an invisible stroke there. So now you can see that the clipping mask is a transparent thing, but it's still working as a clipping mask. Again, selecting the clipping mask just by clicking on the circle and then making sure that it has no stroke and turning off the rest of the paths. So now back to our layer. We select it all. We're going to go to Object, Expand Appearance. And you can kind of see that that did a lot of things, and you'll notice that that's still not enough yet. So again, we go to Object, and then now we're going to expand it for real. Okay, and that takes a while. And now you'll see that we've got several clipping masks and several objects. And then finally, we'll expand it again. And in order for this to become one object that we can actually use, we're going to go to our Properties tab, and we're going to open up our Pathfinder tool. So we're going to go Windows, Pathfinder, and we're going to select the Trim tool. Let's take a look at how that works. We're zoomed in. The hope is like all the blacks will actually be trimmed up. Let's see if we do. Let's try Merge first. So we hit Merge, and as you can see now, everything is a single stroke. You can check it by going into the Direct Selection tool, and you can kind of see that here we go. Everything is now a solid object, and we can now use this object as a single thing. And you can kind of see if we open it up, got some clipping paths for all the little holes in it, but for the most part, I'm going to make it smaller. We can now copy this and paste it, use it as like some type of motif, right? And you can use it like in your design as well. So you can create a bunch of these and use them for whatever you're intending on using for your design. And you can kind of see that they become really nice objects. Hopefully that helps a little bit. In the next tutorial, I will be going over how to create the mandala, but instead of with a reflection, I will go with a rotational symmetry. All right, thanks. In order for us to just get a recap on how to make a mandala, and in this tutorial we're going to just make a different type of mandala setup. Instead of doing kaleidoscope with reflection, we're going to just do rotational symmetry. It'll give us a different look, and we can use that as well. So everything here will go a little bit faster. I'm just going to hit create here to create our 9 by 9 inch square, and quickly I'm going to use the pen tool, P for pen, and just create, holding the shift key down, a line. Hit the escape here to deselect and make sure the line is selected. I'm going to use my direct selection tool. I'm going to open up my layer 1 tool so you can see what's going on. Close Pathfinder, and remember the properties. The first thing we want to do is make sure we're aligned to artboard, and then center it, center this guy in the middle of the artboard perfectly. So now it's perfectly centered. We use the rotate tool, double click that, make sure we use copy and 90 degrees, and now that makes the two paths that'll give us kind of like a quadrant here. Go back to my layers palette. I don't need to draw anything. This is just so you can see things are working, but I will. So now we've made a third path. And again, you can throw this away when you're done. Go back to my direct selection tool. Now we're going to set this area up to do the transform, rotational transform. So we go to the layers 1 and we select the entire layer, layer 1, and then we will go to effects, distort, transform, and transform. And instead of doing the reflection this time, we're going to skip that, and we're just going to do the rotation. So say for instance we do 360 divided by 10. That gives us 10 segments, 10 pieces of pie. So we want 9 plus 1, which is, or 10 plus, 9 plus 1, because 1 was already there. So we're just going to select 9 here, and this will give us the rotational symmetry. And you can kind of see how that's a little bit different than what we've done before, and we're going to hit OK. At this point, we could turn off the paths if you wanted to, but they're useful because they see where you see where you can draw. And then we're going to go to our drawing tool, zoom in, and you can see that, let me actually change that stroke to something interesting and a little thicker. And you can see how this will work. Again, it'll be a completely different look because everything will be based off of this rotational symmetry. So you've got this idea of spiral going on here. So hopefully that'll also give you some greater options. There's no reflection going on, but it does give you a different look and a different way of thinking about this. When you're ready to export, you can always turn off the path so you can see what you've got. You can do this anytime you want as well, because this will kind of work with that. Remember, select everything, go to the layer and select it all. And you notice that when you do that, it's only really selecting this part because that's the only part that you've really drawn. Everything else is just part of that transform effect. So we go to Edit, our Object, Expand Appearance. Now you notice that everything is blue, but again, it's still kind of overlapping, which is not what we want. So then we go to the Pathfinder window. Oops, Pathfinder. And just like before, we're going to use the Merge tool. So we're just going to select everything. And you'll notice everything is selected. And now we're going to hit the Merge button. And that will give us, and we're going to go direct select. And you can kind of see that gives us the outline, and everything inside is a single color, which is what we were hoping for. This object can now be moved. It can be exported. It can be modified. You can duplicate it. It's a single object, as you can kind of see. You could fill it with white so that you don't see through it as well, using the K4 live paint bucket, and just selecting white to fill it. After you've selected it, you can kind of see that will fill these elements in. Kind of do that if you wanted to, and that will be something that people do. Of course, don't fill in, unfortunately, like I did, the path itself, because that'll just fill in that path and make it white. We want to fill it actually in the square itself. So hopefully this helps a little bit, trying something different and refreshing your mind on how to create a mandala effect in Illustrator.